r/AskReddit. Men of Reddit, what are the struggles of dating a very rich girl? This is probably gonna get buried, but I've always wanted to write it out. I was never sure how rich she was. I just knew her family had property in a couple places in the US and China. And this is also how I found out property in China is dumb expensive. When she went for the holidays, if she wanted to say, stay in Shanghai and then go to Beijing later, she didn't have to look at hotels or Airbnb, she just had to make sure she grabbed the right set of keys. It was weird. She wasn't dripping with designer clothes and drove a fuel efficient compact, but just looking at where her family had apartments/houses, I can only imagine. She was a super sweet, down to earth girl. Biggest heart in the world, very hardworking, and acted like a child in a candy shop everywhere she went. I think the biggest strain came when we would eat together. For me, money was tight and the best way to stretch my college scholarship money was to cook meals in bulk. Before she met me, she ate out literally every single meal. At first, it took some adjusting and rebudgeting. Bless her heart, she understood and found compromises. She loved my cooking and would surprise me with groceries and then say I have to pay her back by cooking whatever she wanted. Every once a while she'd pick up the entirety of a bill that we were supposed to split, but she always found a way to make sure I didn't feel down about it. I don't think she ever once bought me an expensive gift. Most things were either handmade or were very thoughtful, for example shoes I'd been eyeing for months but couldn't afford, and she noticed them in my computer browser. I miss that girl. I hope she's doing well. My girlfriend, now wife, wasn't rich herself, but had very rich parents, both lawyers, one in family law, the other in corporate counsel, but they were pretty normal during her upbringing. The law careers and massive salaries came when she was a teenager. The toughest thing was that her parents would offer to pay for nearly anything, but later try to use that as leverage to control her when they didn't like what she was doing. She was college aged, so it happens a bit. Parents and teenagers aren't perfect. Things like stop paying for her car suddenly or reneging on a trip that they offered to pay for and she booked and was suddenly on the hook for the cost. It was certainly toxic from their end, and she kept falling for it each time. However, in her 20s, once she was out of college and employed, she didn't need their money, so anything that was offered with strings attached or had the potential to do that, she could just decline. They learned pretty quickly that manipulation via finances isn't a good way to foster a relationship with your daughter in her 20s. Her mom figured it out, her dad not so much. For unrelated reasons they got divorced, and her relationship is still very strained with her dad. My roommate was very wealthy and her boyfriend ended up living with us for 2 years, and I remember they would have the son fights all the time. He came from a very poor household, tough family life, in a not so great area of the city, didn't graduate high school, etc. He was supporting himself working as a bartender. Compared to his childhood financial situation, he viewed supporting himself with a steady job as being successful, whereas she was always wanting him to do more, be bigger, etc. They also fought a lot over birthday gifts, Christmas gifts, etc. She would buy him really expensive gifts that he needed, but couldn't afford to buy himself. He needed new winter boots and a coat, so she would buy him really nice ones for Christmas. A good coat and boots with 1 or 2 other items can easily get close to $5-600. He could never get her a gift of such magnitude. She was somewhat understanding that he couldn't pay for something like that, but he used to tell me he always felt a lot of pressure to match her really expensive gifts with really creative ones. He said he would dread holidays, Valentine's Day and birthdays, because he would get so stressed out trying to constantly think of creative ways to match her really expensive gifts. It seemed to me like he was getting really bitter about having so much stress over creating a gift versus her being able to spend 5 minutes using her parents' money to get him something. I think it was also tough because she wanted to do so much stuff and had the financial security to do it. She wanted to travel a lot and he just couldn't afford it. She would pay for him sometimes, but that bothered him. I met up with them once when I was living in Thailand, and she kept using phrases like "this is so cheap for." Like she would insist we got to the most expensive restaurants in the area because a comparative restaurant in the States would be way more expensive. She also had a massive inheritance. She doesn't have access to it till she's 35, but he used to tell me he was so bitter that he would probably have to work his whole life until he was dead and would probably never make enough to really retire, whereas she could basically stop working at 35 if she wanted. They dated for 4 years, but it eventually fell apart. If you're coming from a very poor family, as was my case, expect a lot of butting of heads when it comes to financial issues. I was raised very poor. Now I make a decent amount of money, but if I'm ever in a situation where I have a lot of expenses and may run into financial issues, I tend to panic a little bit and plan my spending extremely carefully. My wife came from a wealthy family and she never had to deal with financial struggles at any point in her life, and she doesn't quite care about spending a lot of money. Basically, she doesn't think past the fact that we can afford something. She doesn't think about possibly needing money in the future, and that's where we always butt heads. In short, make sure you ask her to let you know before she spends more than X amount. That was the solution we came up with, and it has actually saved us from a lot of financial trouble. Spending should be a thing you both agree on, otherwise it's not going to work out. I dated a girl in college that came from a very wealthy family, Texas oil money. Like, she flew from Dallas to Florida, where we went to school, in her dad's business jet. That kinda rich. I think the biggest thing for me was how out of touch she was with everyday money issues. For example, someone smashed into my car in the parking lot, and I was totally upset about it. She was like, "It's okay, you can just get a new one." She had no concept of how insurance or deductibles work, and she didn't understand that I could not simply go out and get it fixed right away. Another example was that she wanted me to go to Miami to see a U2 concert with her. She had like front row tickets. I couldn't go because I had to work. She didn't understand that my boss would not give a shit about how cool it would be to see U2. This was before they sucked. Admitting financial struggles. When my wife and I were dating in university, her family invited me up to their cottage during the break between Christmas and New Year's to ski, skate and otherwise play in the snow. I wanted to go, but I didn't know how to ski and had no outdoor clothing appropriate to be out in the snow. No ski jacket, pants, or boots. I declined the invitation, but my then girlfriend was really sad and asked why. I had to admit I didn't have the gear needed, and I couldn't afford them. She then passed it on to her family, and when I visited them on Christmas Day, they led me to a room with 3 types of everything new with tags laid out on a bed for me to choose from. It was a wonderful gesture, but I had mixed feelings. I appreciated the gear very much, but I felt like a charity case. Also, managing expectations of my wife for travel and expectations with children's activities. She was used to jetting away whenever they felt like it and had her own horses growing up. That's just not an option for us. We do okay and we are happy, but horses are not financially viable. Let me tell a story that I think will provide a nice contrast to the majority of the comments here. This story isn't mine, but that of a close friend's brother. So Joe went away to college and met Sarah there halfway through freshman year. They were on again off again for a few months before deciding to date seriously in junior year. They met each other's families on vacation or when they would come to visit their kids at school. By all accounts, Sarah's family was polite and nice and relatively laid back. Not a whiff of arrogance or anything like that. Fast forward to the end of senior year. Joe's paternal grandfather is on his deathbed and Joe desperately wants to go say goodbye. However, they go to school in a small town with a private airport, think Cessnas, and the closest major airport is several hours away by car, and neither of them have a car. Said airport also didn't have a direct flight, so it would have been pushing 24 hours until he got to the hospice center to see his grandfather. This was destroying Joe, as he and grandpa were very close, and he was essentially a second father to him. Without a word, Sarah pulled Joe into a cab and took him to the airport. Waiting for them was Sarah's family's private plane. Joe and my friend and her family were all astounded. They had no idea Sarah's family was wealthy, and especially not private plane wealthy. Anyways, off Joe went, and he said goodbye and he flew coach back to school. Sarah never said a word about it one way or the other, and neither did Joe. They are now married and both doing well in their careers, and from what I can tell live a very normal life. But every once in a while they disappear off to some remote island or jungle or mountain for a few days a year and don't tell anyone but their family where they're going. I was an aspiring lawyer and she an aspiring artist. She came from a rich family and I grew up in a bad social economic area. My parents were refugees back in the 70s. Basically never knew how rich she was until I went to her hometown for her brother's wedding. Apart from the amazing apartment her parents had, they had an empty apartment in the downtown area for guests that I could sleep in. Easily the fanciest place I've stayed at. Oh, and her older brother, that was in the family business, had to go to the factories they owned to do something. Relationships started to take a hit when her dad blamed me for his daughter's dreams of being an artist. I only made her believe in herself and to choose her destiny herself instead of letting her parents force her into the family business. She changed her major from business management to art without me knowing, and her parents freaked out and blamed me for it. I couldn't really handle the drama and law school, so we ended things. Last time I checked her out she was in an art school somewhere in Europe. Seems like she's still living the dream. Edit. Just to clarify, I didn't wanna break a happy home or anything. My ex had severe anxiety and depression about her major that her parents chose for her. She was never happy at uni and that's why we talked about her choosing her own life. Second edit. Wow, this blew up. Never watch the movies people are typing as comments. Seems like a lot of movies have the same premise as my story and people umming me telling me I'm lying. I'm really not. I didn't wanna put out too many details cause I don't wanna out me or her in some way. In the end you believe what you want to believe. Nothing. There was literally nothing wrong with dating a rich girl when I was poor back in college. I had a good major, was an athlete, and her family loved me. I didn't have money to give her flashy gifts, and she didn't care. If she wanted a Birkin, she'd just shop with her mom. I didn't have money to take her on fancy vacations or trips. We'd just go skiing at her parents' condo, and I could always find a way to scrape up some money to get myself there and everything else would be taken care of. They didn't care that I wasn't an appropriate suitor at the time. I was just a college kid and must have done a nice enough job of presenting myself that they knew I'd figure it out. It was an awesome relationship, one of the least stressful relationships imaginable. We eventually fell out of love for other reasons, but I look back on that time fondly and we ended things amicably. Still on good terms with the family too. I can't say very rich, but my wife and I definitely come from different socioeconomic castes. Her family was upper middle class, and mine was just above poverty level. She just didn't understand the panic I felt when money was running low. She didn't know the dread you get when your car starts making a strange noise and you know you can't afford to fix it. For her, everything would work out because she had parents with money to swoop in and make it all better. In short, she never understood the struggle and wasn't very smart with her money. It's not even that she wasn't smart, it's that she wasn't the same sort of ingenious that poor people are with stretching every penny. Eventually, we both got decent jobs and managed to put back a good savings, and we both grew to understand each other's money habits. I guess I had a different type than everyone else. We worked together, and you wouldn't know she was rich unless you really got to know her. She worked as a diversion, something to do, and meet new people. She never looked at the price of anything, had a $5,000 watch, Dolce & Gabbana glasses she would break at least once a month cause she's clumsy. Very humble, very sweet, and probably the hardest worker there. We were managers. The issue was that there was absolutely nothing we could do together that was new to her. She had more money and free time. Her bucket list was completed by 22. There was nothing new or fresh within my, I don't know the word, realm, ability. We got along great, and I found out from a mutual friend she was excited to be with someone not using her or groveling cause she was back quote fuck you levels of rich. It was my pride I think that ruined it, nothing she did. I had issues letting her pay for everything, and I was unable to show her anything she hadn't seen. I stopped being fun because I couldn't wow or impress her, and it got in my head. She was perfectly happy doing normal things, but it wasn't enough for me. I had to impress her. We lost contact years ago. I hope she's doing well. She was fucking awesome and deserves to be happy. Not the man, but the rich girl. I hope you guys are interested in my story. I come from a family who built their way in the world and got very wealthy. Growing up my parents had me and my sister working regular jobs, so we would learn the value of money. It worked. Back then, I was not allowed to date anyone until I was 18. Not that I ever cared, because I was a nerd and preferred my video games to real people. When I got older and nature described to kick in, I was starting college, and I met a guy. He was very handsome and did not seem to care who my family was. I was pleased because most people would fake to be my friends because of my background. That lasted until I met his parents. He was from a lower middle class family and his parents were all about the what are the neighbors going to think mindset. They are so excited about me that they started being so weird, buying a Mercedes that they could not afford, buy nice clothes, expensive wines. The guy just got terrible after a few years. We moved together in a very nice downtown condo, and he went mad. He loaded his credit card to buy expensive watches, suits, shoes. My dad got him a job in a good company and I guess he thought he was a big shot now. I left him about 6 months later because he was trying to change me into a trophy wife. He was getting upset if I did not have my coupon or if I was gaming in my PJs all day / night because you know, if someone would have knocked the door and I was dressed like that, what would they have thought? When I left, I was still paying for the condo he was living in. His parents were harassing me about their son's future and trying to manipulate me into going back. I'm not that stupid. I tried to get him to buy me out of the condo. He did not want it to. We got into a massive legal fight. It was terrible. My buddy married a super rich girl from China. He grew up in the suburbs and came from an economically poor family. He went from rags to riches. Literally started from nothing. I remember growing up as kids, he'd eat mayonnaise sandwiches at school. He changed quite a bit. He went from having nothing that was branded to suddenly having everything, including a brand new Porsche. He was outfitted with super expensive clothes, lost a bunch of weight, and turned out pretty good for himself. Anyway, he later discovered that his in-laws were just using him for immigration / business purposes, since he's a citizen here, and he ended up divorcing his wife, having no kids. Half of nothing is, well, nothing. He got a divorce with the clothes on his back and his car that he was given. Since the divorce he got a high-paying corporate job making 6 figures, still has all his luxury goods, and is currently dating someone who looks like a supermodel. Oh yeah, and he still has his Porsche SUV. Why can't this happen to me? Edit. He's also super generous with money. On numerous occasions he would buy drinks, dinners, give money to friends in actual need, and feed the poor, since he grew up poor. He's sort of careless with money, since he never really had it to begin with. He grew up with a minimalist lifestyle. His marriage literally changed his life. Edit 2. His advantage over his ex-wife was the fact that they both hated university. His ex-wife dropped out of university, but he had the nerve to keep going and actually complete his program, which is why he's making so much now, as this became his backup plan after his divorce. My wife is very well off. She is a super successful doctor. She makes enough money that I don't have to work. When we started dating I was a single father living in my parents' basement. I can say this with all honesty. If she is a good person, her money doesn't matter. The people with bad experiences didn't have bad experiences with rich women. They had bad experiences with shitty people who happen to be rich. My wife was amazing, never made me feel bad, supported me, helped me find a career I flourished and succeeded at. Her money has never been an issue in any way. She is my best friend and the struggles are as such. I get to fly first class to amazing places and stay in swanky hotels. I get to make dinner and pack lunches for her for work as she works crazy hours sometimes. I get to use that time to do tons of gaming and playing with my kid. We bought a huge awesome acreage and I'll be retiring before 40 to take care of the property, her and my son. Her family is kind and loving and hilarious, super welcoming, and love my son like one of their own. They love how happy I make her and how much I take care of her. There's never been a single thing other than normal relationship fights we all occasionally have. Oh, there is one thing. She often forgets I don't make the same amount of money. So when I bought a new vehicle she wanted us to go buy a fancy thing and I wanted to buy my own vehicle that was economical and probably used. We compromised and bought a new, but not flashy truck. Also she will spend more on a purse than I would for a used car, and I can't for the life of me wrap my head around it. But I grew up dirt poor like no toys and spam poor, so we just grew up in different worlds. Anyways, all this babbling to say, if she is a good person raised by good people, and he or she isn't an insecure child, there are no issues, only delightful perks you never expected. I have a thing for strong women, so her making so much more money than me never bugged me. I'm just very proud of her and her passion and ambition, and that she chose me. I often joke I'm living every 1960s girl's dream. She often jokes that she worked this hard so she could marry poor if that's what she fell in love with. My girlfriend grew up pretty well off and developed some expensive habits and tastes. When we first started dating she was okay with eating at Chick-fil-A and restaurants of the sorts, but as time went on she started to refuse going there and wanted to go out to better places. There was one night where she was going to cook dinner before we went out for the night. She messed up the recipe a bit and tossed the whole meal in the trash and said we could just go eat out somewhere. I was panicked inside, money was low and I didn't know how I would pay for gas or rent until I got paid again. I threw out suggestions for things I could afford like pizza, chicken or Mexican food, but she and her sister decided they wanted to go to this upscale steakhouse. We went there and she and her sister both had like $35 meals, so I didn't order anything and just said I was feeling sick and not hungry. I don't know if she fully grasped the concept of bills and how expensive they can be. Her parents paid for everything for her. We had many conversations about money and not being able to afford fancy dinners, but she would always say that I need to save my money and be smarter with it. I'm not very rich, but I'm a girl who definitely comes from a more well-off family than my boyfriend does. I would say I'm upper middle class. His family gets by, but they have financial troubles now and again. He seems to have no idea how to manage money. Starbucks, eating out, movies, all the time. When I had to buy a car, I bought a used but dependable Toyota, paid full price. He bought a brand new BMW that he can only afford to pay in installments. That's another thing that bugs me. For all big purchases, laptop, car, etc., he pays in installments. I was always taught that, excepting really big purchases like a house or such, only buy things you can afford to pay full price for at the time. It saves money and curbs your spending habits. I pay for all the dates, but I'm getting tired of eating out and tips and always getting appetizers, drinks, and dessert. Over the course of our relationship, I've learned to spend a lot more, and he's learned to save more, but there is still a discrepancy. Using my throwaway account. Dated the daughter of multi-millionaires for 3 years. I'm a working class lad from Yorkshire. She was Sunni Muslim, and I'm non-religious. Grew up strict Christian though. Her dad didn't like me. I have tattoos and piercings which he despised. Her mum was lovely. The Muslim thing wasn't an issue to them. The fact I was a different nationality and wasn't rich was the biggest issue. The relationship was great, but she was so spoiled and entitled. But because I'm the type to call people out on their bullshit, it kind of worked well. She needed someone to tell her no, which she'd never had before. We nearly got married, but eventually we broke up. There was a lot of pressure from her family and she's with a Muslim guy from her home country now, which I guess was inevitable. Weirdly enough, she's one of 4 wealthy girls I've dated. And here is the biggest issue with dating rich girls, and why I'll probably never do it again. They think they can just throw money at you, and it'll solve all the problems. No affection, ridiculous entitlement, inability to communicate, and the depth of a puddle. Give me a working class lass that's up for a laugh anytime over that shit. Not extremely rich, but lived in the nice suburbs, and had well-off parents. Her dad alone made probably 10x what my parents made combined. High maintenance. She knew she was well off, and put a lot of pressure on me to be well off for the future too, even though we were just in high school. A lot of mental issues. Money doesn't fix everything, and now that I've dated girls from more humble backgrounds, they are more likely to appreciate the little things and stay happy. Not very sympathetic. When it came to money, my mom lost her job once, and it made us even poorer for a few months, and my GF just didn't understand how stressed I was, and would even get mad at me for not being more positive about it. Looks wise, she could afford nicer stuff and food, so she just gave off the vibe of being upper class, even if she was dressed down. It was interesting, because people pick up on that easily, and so there were a lot of thirsty dudes around her. Anyways, I'm rich now, and would I go back to dating a girl like that? Probably not. I'm happier dating girls who also come from humble beginnings. This will be buried, but my GF is 26 and has over $7 million, even more in investments. I bring in like $300 a week, and to be honest, we dated for a good 6 months before I found out how filthy rich she is. When she was 1, she got in a car accident and her car seat paralyzed her. After a lawsuit, she was awarded a huge settlement that paid out in full when she turned 18. Since then she's been investing her money into various companies. It's a little awkward when she wants to do huge, expensive trips, but we manage. When I found out how rich she really was, it was when she bet me I wouldn't walk out of our room with my dick sticking out of a tear in my boxers when her friend came over in the morning. I told her I'll do it if you take me to Disneyland. She hates Disneyland, and she said she'll take us for 2 days. I thought it was all part of a joke after I sent her male friend screaming she was googling resorts/hotels ECT. We didn't end up going because I thought she was joking. Later we had a talk about how much money she actually has. I should have put 2 and 2 together earlier, but I honestly had no idea to the extent. She doesn't like when people know how much money she has, hence keeping it a secret from me for so long. She's an amazing woman, speaks French, Spanish, Arabic, and a little Russian. She's helped a non-profit company that came up with an ingenious design for a brake system for wheelchairs, and she's helping me get a book edited and published through the network of people she knows. I married a wealthy girl and it was weird at first. Luckily I make a 6-figure salary, so I didn't feel completely out of my element, but I remember the first time her parents invited us to the country club in the summer. My, at the time girlfriend, wife asked me what I was going to wear, and I was baffled. At that point I just wore jeans, t-shirts, flannels and gym shorts. I had a great collection of shoes, but they were basically boots, flip-flops or Vans tennis shoes. I didn't play golf, but I did play a bunch of disc golf with stoners. I had to go out, buy new outfits, learn proper silverware techniques and all that shit. Years later I've become very close with her family, but at one point I had to stand up and draw a line in the sand, which basically said I'm never going to pop my collar, wear dress shoes with jeans, or join this country club. I'm always going to smoke weed, own a pit bull or 2, and stay home on Sunday mornings. But I will make sure your daughter has the best life I can possibly provide her. Now we're very close, and they feel bad because they are shitty grandparents and money can't help them with that one. Lower middle class Mexican guy here. She was Indian and her family's household income was around $400,000 a year. This girl grew up in debate taking swimming lessons from Olympic coaches. She herself had not experienced any struggle. Our biggest arguments were about how I needed to get a master's in a lucrative career that could keep her in the lane she had become accustomed. Our next biggest struggles were because she didn't understand how circumstances could leave people in cycles of poverty. She really believed there were no excuses. Homeless people and poor people should just try harder and go to college to get better jobs. We ended up breaking up because as a non-Indian/non-white person I would have needed at least a master's degree in a lucrative career in order to meet her family. It killed me because her personality was otherwise perfect. But after that breakup I felt worthless for years, like I wasn't good enough for anyone. Disconnect about what sharing really means and why it's important. Very early on we moved in together, and beside me having to hide my stuff when I was there is one story that sticks out the most. I bought a case of beer, a 2 to 4 for my fellow Ontario folk, put it in the fridge because we had some guests come over for dinner. Now it's university days, so people are not rich by any means. I worked a high-paying summer job, so I was happy to share my spoils a bit. Everyone who came in could have a few beers, and I was happy to share it. At the end of the night, she was upset. She finally asked me, why did you give all our beer away? She didn't even drink much beer. She had all the wine in the world. I was shocked. I explained my reasoning, and she was still pissed. This should have been a red flag. This behavior never really changed. I stuck it out 7 years. I do authentically regret trying to make it work. Thank you so much for watching the entire video. I would be so grateful if you could like this video and subscribe to the channel. New videos every day.